So this is going to be part two in this little exoneration of Alec Murdaugh series that, I mean, I started it and I wasn't going to finish it, but here I am again. So part two, and I'm not scripted this time around. I'm just sitting here hanging out, casually speaking into my microphone. So the verdict was rendered against Alec Murdaugh on March 2nd, 2023. And Alan Wilson had conducted that courtroom for 6 weeks straight, saying nothing about Paul Murdaugh's amputated hands. So if you go to YouTube and you Google Alan Wilson press conference and you scroll down a little bit, you're going to find a 15-minute video about Alec Murdaugh after the verdict. Just watch that. Just let Alan Wilson tell you, yeah, this courtroom is a farce, and I know there's a chainsaw amputating Paul Murdaugh's hands, and you're going to probably think it's me, aren't you? And I'm like, sure am. And he's like, no, 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 no. Go look at Daniel Lebetsky. I had to feed the lead prosecutor kind bars.
I have to bring in kind bars.
So he tells me, go look at Daniel Lebetsky. Now, it took me a very long time to sort through Alec Murdaugh. Just all it, because I had to go from Paul Murdaugh's missing his hands to, oh, you didn't tell me about his hands because Paul Murdaugh's missing his endocrine system. So adrenaline harvesting, when a human endocrine system is removed from a body, they are after the parts of the body that produce adrenaline. So I understand adrenaline harvesting. It's called adrenochrome, but I don't use that word all too much just because, like, the first time I used it, I learned about something called QAnon. Well, heard about something called QAnon. I never went and figured out what that is exactly. But adrenochrome is apparently this conspiracy that people think it's blood harvesting, but it's not. It's adrenaline harvesting. They don't care about the blood. Paul Murdaugh's blood says that it's not the blood they're after, it's the human endocrine system. So eventually, and it was April in 2023 when Daniel Lebetsky entered my research. It was June when adrenochrome, whatever that was, and I had to educate myself on what adrenochrome was, but when that entered my research, I went viral on TikTok in April 2024. And I know Daniel Lebetsky, I ended up on his periphery because his backup account, I had his main account blocked for the longest time because I was not ready to deal with him. I had already gotten what I needed from him. That was to say, sir, are you there? And he said, yes. I said, sir, is there a butcher? And he said, yes, it is Jose Andres. And he's posting on social media, and I am having to psychoanalyze where I'm asking these questions, and whether he likes it or not, he is going to give me an answer. He was very compliant, and I can in hindsight see that he was cooperating with the idea of me existing. I had not approached him at that point, but he was acting and conducting himself as if he's at the Moselle crime scene. He understands he needs somebody to look at it. He wants somebody to see the full picture. So he told me Jose Andres is the butcher at the crime scene with me. I knew Nikki Haley was at the crime scene because when Daniel Lebetsky had entered my chat from Alan Wilson plugging him at the courthouse, I went straight to Google and I said, Daniel Lebetsky and Alec Murdaugh. And it brings back this picture of Daniel Lebetsky and Nikki Haley. So I'm like, okay. And I figured it must be something to do with the bank accounts because they keep these things that they don't want us to know, consider, think about, or understand. They keep those on the very periphery and out of sight if they possibly can pull it off. So the bank accounts, the hand amputations, the adrenaline harvesting, all of that is pushed to the periphery. And I'm like, no, let's bring this back to the center because that's what it's about. So with Daniel Lebetsky and Nikki Haley, in this picture together, the timestamp on it is February 22nd, 2019. And that's not 48 hours before Mallory Beach is ejected off of Alec Murdaugh's boat. So I'm like, okay, I'm looking at something cosmic too. So, and I'm sorry, that all just went a little out of order because I knew about Nikki Haley basically the same time I knew about Daniel Lebetsky. He introduces Jose Andres as the butcher. I know there's a butcher. I'm looking for a butcher. He showed me a butcher. his timestamp is March 9th. That's the same day I started looking at Alec Murdaugh. So on the day that I'm coming to give this case a little attention, Daniel Lebetsky, is over there saying, here's the butcher, you're gonna need this one day. So I've checked out all of his interviews. I mean, I had to do a whole research project on him, even though I'll tell you, I did not give him the attention or credit that he deserved. And I held on to my anger and my human instinct to want to hang somebody for Paul Murdaugh's blood. I held that against Daniel Lebetsky for a very long time. And when I finally, the whole time I went through Alec Murdaugh, I held on to that anger for Daniel Lebetsky. When I finally got through with Alec Murdaugh, when I knew there was a helicopter, I knew Nikki Haley's dental impressions are at the crime scene. I knew who the pilot for the helicopter was because I had Googled, and this is in November 2023. I had Googled Daniel Lebetsky helicopter when I heard Alec Murdaugh say Wildcat, and I was like, what are you saying? And it's in the context of a loud engine noise. And it's like, okay, you're saying either farm equipment or a helicopter. And a helicopter made sense. So I had Googled Daniel Lebetsky helicopter, and Google tells me it's a man named Jesus Montas. And that man sits on the board of directors for a company called Biogen. And Biogen is a pharmaceutical chemist that has Googleable links, connections, a relationship that you can see on Google with a company called Nissan Chemical, which was founded by a man named Joe Kitchie-Tekamine. And Joe Kitchie-Tekamine is the man who had coined the word adrenaline back in 1901. So I can see, and Joe Kitchie-Tekamine, is the one who even told me, like, he's processing adrenaline inside of a chemical lab, and he's telling me this chemical makes adrenaline turn this color. This one makes it turn this color. And I mean, red, green, purple, all different colors. Adrenochrome, Google tells me that it is a deep violet color, so like fuchsia, pinkish purple. Ferric chloride is the chemical that Joe Kitchie-Tekamine tells me makes it turn that color. So I'm assuming adrenochrome is, excuse me, and I mean, assuming is probably the wrong, I'm inferring that adrenochrome is the chemical process of pure adrenaline by ferric chloride. But Joe Kitchie-Tekamine is a character in this adrenaline harvesting part of Alec Murdaugh's saga that I'm looking at. When Jesus Montas, the helicopter pilot, is sitting on the board of directors for Biogen, who has a relationship, company relationship with Joe Kitchie-Tekamine, that's who I need to see. So I know that Jesus Montas, and he holds a helicopter pilot license. So that's the pilot dropping the helicopter on Moselle. And I knew that November 2023. Now went viral in April 2024. And I blocked Daniel Lebetsky. I was not ready to approach him. I was not ready to give him even a fraction of the attention that he deserves. So I finished up with Alec Murdaugh. And then, I got my own mind together, and I sat down, and it was July 5th, 2024. And I was holding Daniel Lebetsky's book, which I had ordered months and months before, and the table of contents alone freaked me out. Yep, that's all I need to see. And then, yep, I'll give you the time of day one day, maybe. I didn't need anything else for a while. But once it got to the point that I understood I need to give him, Daniel Lebetsky, the man, some real attention, I took his book and I said, sir, you have 10 minutes to tell me where to direct this rage, this anger, this attention that I'm not trying to give to you because, So his book, and when I was going through his book asking this question, who holds your leash? Who harvests adrenaline for profit? Okay. He, inside the book, and I'd read bits and pieces here and there. So like I understood he's enslaved in 1994 somewhere in the Middle East. But I wasn't going to just jump and say who, you know? But I'm reading his book, and it happened towards the end of chapter 6, I think. I don't know. It was around page 177, because it's on page 177 when he finally just was like, he got through to me. But the way it started was like at the end of chapter 6, in the beginning of chapter 7, he puts the Kind Bar wrappers on my periphery, calling for a plastic chemist, because he basically says nobody had invested in the technology to have a clear packaging for the snack products that would preserve the product. So if nobody had invested in it, that means that he's basically creating it brand new. To create a brand new plastic, that requires a chemist. So there's a chemist that he, Daniel Lebetsky, in his book, was putting on my periphery. And it kind of tugged at me, snapped his fingers in my face and said, "Don't you know a pharmaceutical chemist?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I sure do, you know?" And I kept reading, like I turned the page one time, and he said it, clear wrappers, clear wrapper. He says that so much. Clear wrappers, clear wrappers, clear wrappers. But eventually on page 177, he just puts it in parentheses and he says, literally transparent. And I'm like, okay, that's what I'm looking for. I got you. Understand. Literally, you want me to know the manufacturer of the clear Kind Bar wrappers, and that is answering the question that I came asking: who holds your leash? Who harvests adrenaline for profit? Got you. Let me go to Google and ask. So I did. Who makes the clear Kind Bar wrappers? And at that point, now it's 2024, the Kind Company had been sold to Mars. So it's not like in 2015 when he's writing this book, things can change. Okay. Between that's a whole decade basically. But it got the answer on Google was pulling up this company called Sabic. And they're all over America. I mean, I'm not unfamiliar with what Sabic is. I just didn't understand that it stood for Saudi Arabia Basic Industry Corporation, Sabic. And so I was like, okay. I started looking at Saudi Arabia. Now I know adrenochrome being an underground industry, it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. It's crimes against humanity, so it's not going to be something that you find on the stock market. You're not going to find the $1 trillion spot, whatever that is, account, stash. You're not going to find that listed somewhere. It's crimes against humanity. So I'm looking into Saudi Arabia because that's who Daniel Lebetsky is telling me I need to look at. They're, as an entity, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, so I'm saying the royal family, is the world's trillionaire. That's where you can find one positive $1 trillion in a singular entity. I need multi-trillions to begin with. What is the other entity where you're going to find a multi-trillion-dollar accumulated number? Because it's the American national debt. So I'm understanding that Daniel Lebetsky is enslaved by Saudi Arabia to have a covert bank account converting our national debt into Saudi Arabia's positive bottom line, and it must exist only in this covert bank account in Daniel Lebetsky's name. Now, we socially secure our newborn babies before we bring them home from the hospital to back serial numbered dollar bills. Gross domestic product is newborn baby endocrine systems and numbered names that we call tax identification once we start being employable. So this U.S.-Saudi relationship is now where I'm at. That is where Daniel Lebetsky got me, to the U.S.-Saudi relationship. So while Daniel Lebetsky's mind is all over that crime scene, spelling it out in Paul Murdaugh's blood, because he was going to be killed anyway. I was not right to hold my anger, my want to hang somebody for Paul Murdaugh's blood. It is not right for me to hold that against Daniel Lubetsky, because he showed me the United States had been enslaved by Saudi Arabia before any of us were born. It happened in 1933 when we gave them our gold. $170,000 worth of gold in 1933 is everything we had basically back then. And we started numbering our babies 2 years after that. FDR was shaking Ibn Saud's hand in 1945. And it's in 1977, with the Joint Commission on Economic Cooperation and the newly formed Department of Energy, where our economy, the noose is on it at that point. 1977. Daniel Lubetsky was not even 10 years old, single-digit age little boy. He has a microchip in his body somewhere, implanted in 2009, because that's where the multi-trillion-dollar fortune is. Positive bottom line in his name in 2009. And it belongs to Saudi Arabia. All that money did. I'm not sure where it's at right now. But the microchip in Daniel Lubetsky's body in 2009. Paul Murdaugh is going to be killed for a headline because he had put the bank account, not because, but because the bank accounts in Alec Murdaugh's name were hit in the headlines. They were trying to kill Paul Murdaugh to generate a headline. And they wanted to tell us that he committed suicide. Daniel Lubetsky took that tiny little window and said, nope, we're going to sit here and we're going to spell out the contents of Alec Murdaugh's bank accounts, because he had taken those trillions and he separated the money from the microchip when Nikki Haley had sold Alec Murdaugh and his fake Forge account out to Daniel Lubetsky, trying to protect her own name. So he used that Moselle crime scene to say, you've got endocrine systems being snatched out, you've got Nikki Haley biting a chunk out of this man's arm, and you've got the whole state of South Carolina, who should have put it on the court record the first time. What are they going to do now? Because they want to tell you it's suicide. When it goes to the court record, they told us that it was 2 gunshot wounds and nothing else. Alec Murdaugh with 2 gunshot wounds. We need to know about South Carolina's corruption, because that's Alec Murdaugh's original intention with the first fake Forge account, the one that we have all heard about, where he has a 40-year sentence for doing things with money that he shouldn't have done. Alec Murdaugh was creating a historical record to say, this case, this client, this money disappears to that annuity payout company fronting for that governed gang. All he could get was the annuity payout company fronting for the government gang. The money was disappearing before. But because he's severing the legal claim using his own name, putting that money in that first fake Forge account and then pushing it over where it was going to go regardless. But he made a record with the client's name because he paid the client. Nobody went a dozen years without being paid. He paid the client. They weren't being paid before this little move. And he, severing the legal claim on his own name, was saving their lives, his clients' lives, so that they wouldn't be attacked again to sever that legal claim. And I'm talking about killed this time, because the first time they're attacked, it's just to generate a lucrative lawsuit and treat Alec Murdaugh's law license like a big old laundromat. So, this one's about Daniel Lubetsky, but it's very much about Alec Murdaugh's bank accounts too. And Daniel Lubetsky is the one at the crime scene who wants us to know the whole truth. And he did have the gumption, wherewithal, nerve, just the basic human decency to take the terrible situation that was going to be Paul Murdaugh killed for a headline saying he committed suicide, and show one time on pavement what's actually going on, what is actually happening in this world. And it's the US-Saudi relationship. And our side of it, from what I can tell, very few people can even start to approach it the way I can. They might know something's not right. They might know that they themselves are corrupt and willingly selling the American people out. Like FDR, that's him. He knew he was selling us out for personal gain. Did he know why? I don't think so. Did he know, like, snatching endocrine systems is what Saudi Arabia does? It is their literal religion. It's called Wahhabism. And it's about since 1744, but you can go and research that, and you just have to keep the idea of snatching endocrine systems or chewing on a fresh adrenal gland, because that's essentially the same thing. If you chew on the fresh adrenal gland before it could be chemically processed, because it wasn't chemically processed until the 1900s. So in the 1800s, they're popping fresh adrenal glands in their mouths. And it's the same thing. The adrenaline harvesting, it's the same thing. It's just one is an ancient technique and the other one is a modern technique. And what's going on with our economy, obviously, is the modern technique, because it makes the adrenaline shelf stable. It turns it into a profitable product. And it is sourced by human endocrine systems. So, this is me just talking into my microphone, trying to flesh out a little bit of the next layer. And I don't know if I need to say anything else. Like, what happened to Alec Murdaugh is garbage. Daniel Lebetsky's character inside of Mr. Murdaugh's saga, worth examining and worth giving him a fair and unbiased look, because it is not easy to understand, and it is the most outrageous thing you will ever see, over and over and over. And he had to live that life. And I mean, Daniel Lebetsky, the founder and CEO of Kind Brand Snacks, had to live that life, be that man. The only choice I ever really get to see him make is what he did with the crime scene at Moselle. And while I am livid to see Paul Murdaugh's endocrine system free pouring on the pavement, I've never seen it anywhere else. I don't want to see it ever again. I appreciate that there is one good historical record, and I will go so hard to make sure that it is a solid historical record. It does not need to happen ever again. Ever again. We needed to see it, though. And I can respect the fact that it has happened, given all the situation. And I must respect the fact that it's happened, because we can't take it back. But we ought not ignore it. And we ought to understand all of the implications packed into the fact his endocrine system is not there. And the courtroom wouldn't even tell us about his hands. And they told us it was all Alec Murdaugh to try to make their own corruption, their own criminality, and their own treason disappear. So I hope you understand Mr. Lebetsky a little bit more. I hope you give him some fair attention. Do not go over there to him being hateful. Don't go over there. None of it. Just understand his position inside of Mr. Murdaugh's saga. That's a real thing, and that's more real than what the courtroom's going to give you.